Hello, everyone. This is BigReed with another episode of Gaming's Lost Memories, episode 29, Majora's Mask. So I wanted to do a retrospective on some older games that I went back and replayed lately. So gaming is unique, and it's at this point in my life, just with life, age, responsibilities. It's a little bit more difficult to allocate the time to like sit down in front of a TV and play a video game. So I think that's why I've been so high on the Switch and being able to just like you know pick up a console, play it for like 5 minutes, click a button, it's back in sleep mode. But what was funny is due to I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but there are a lot of things that like squirrel. Oh! I get distracted very easily. So I've been going through recently and kind of just picking up games where I either started them, got halfway through, and I've been completing them. And Majora's Mask was one of those. So I had started it a couple years ago whenever it came back out on the Switch, the Nintendo Switch Online, the 64 replayables, and like I fired it up, got to like playable, saved, and then turned it off. So recently I was like, you know what, let me go back and finish Majora's Mask, just because I wanted to see how I felt all these years later from when I first played the game. So it's 25 years old at this point, came out in 2000, and I wanted to see how I felt about it. I played the 3DS remake, and when I say remake in comparison to Ocarina of Time 3D, it is a remake. It's kind of like shocking how much they changed in the game. And I didn't like the changes too much. There were a lot of quality of life mechanics that the 3DS versions of both of those games got that I enjoyed, especially Ocarina of Time. I feel like they didn't change anything. They just changed the graphics, and you're able to, change the iron boots with the click of a button. And that was really all I was looking for, because like I didn't want that classic touched, similar to like the Final Fantasy VII remake that's currently happening episodically. So I actually played the 64 version of Majora's Mask. The biggest thing that I used this time were the save states. So the game has, its standard save system where you have the statues that also teleport you. You smack them with your sword, and you're able to save. But yeah, I went back, I replayed it. I kind of wanted to just walk through the game and share some of my experiences. And not only just my thoughts on how it holds up 25 years later, but also just my memories from the first time playing it to this time playing it. And I think it's important to notate that a lot of games during the 64 and PS1 era, Sega Saturn as well, which I love, so many of the mechanics were new. So a lot of the gameplay, because they had to, I talked about this a little bit in another podcast recently, but going from 2D to 3D, they had to redo all of the gameplay just because you're in a 3D space now, and it's so much different than being in a 2D space. Just as a side note too, from having played video games a long time, if your game makes sense to be, top down or in 2D or something like that, or a side scroller or Metroidvania, if that's what makes sense, that's what makes sense. And those games are still absolutely awesome. Playing like a game like A Link to the Past is still awesome. So it's really nice seeing indie developers be able to make the game in the method that they decide. And a lot of people will say nostalgia, but I honestly, I don't believe every game needs to be 3D. But Majora's Mask is one of those games that exists in that 3D space. And want to kind of give just a couple highlights as to the origin of the game, and then kind of share some of my experiences from playing it originally. So, took a Nintendo about 5 years to make Ocarina of Time 3D, and they spent a lot of time creating that engine. During that time with the Nintendo 64, Nintendo lost Goodness gracious, a ton of third party support. So, Final Fantasy migrated off, Metal Gear Solid migrated off. I mean, there's so many titles that, moved over to the CD-ROM, just you needed more disk space. Excuse me, you needed more space on the, for the games themselves, especially with the new 3D technology. And Nintendo's whole philosophy is doing more with less. You know what I mean? So it's really funny looking back on the Nintendo 64 because it has some of the greatest games of all time. Like literally, you can look at both Zelda, Super Mario 64, Smash Brothers came out on that, and there's probably like 10 others I could list that are really, highly praised for that time. But not every developer can be Nintendo, and it was kind of hard seeing a lot of games migrate over, and then the PlayStation during this time was seen as like the cool console. It's funny how much has changed since arguing on the message boards and defending Nintendo being kiddie or oh it's for babies, and I'm like now it's really interesting seeing kind of all of that go away. For the most part. Like if I was going to buy any console for a kid, it would definitely be a Nintendo console just because I know there's going to be a plethora of games that anybody can play, and I'm not like, okay, you're going to play Skyrim or Grand Theft Auto. Like you can play Mario or Pokemon or Zelda, and they're good games, but they're also accessible, to pretty much any audience. But with Majora's Mask, Nintendo didn't have 5 years to make another Zelda game, and they created this entire engine for Zelda, and they made one game. Now, don't get me wrong; it sold, I think it was 7 or 10 million copies for the time. So at that point in Zelda's history, it was the greatest or the highest selling Zelda game. So they needed to do something because third party support was lower, and they spent all of this time, effort, and money making this. So they're like, okay, here's a challenge. Shiggy comes out and he's like, we got to challenge ourselves, and we're going to take 1 year to make another Zelda game using the assets of Ocarina of Time. So that's where we're at. So it's like, okay, they gotta, but you can't make the same game a second time. And there was just a lot of uniqueness and innovation that was utilized with this game, and it's honestly Majora's Mask is probably the weirdest Zelda title. A lot of people feel that it's the darkest and most mature, and I think a lot of that darkness comes from how like uncanny and odd everything is, especially compared to Ocarina of Time. Now, geez, I didn't want to make this like an Ocarina of Time versus Majora's Mask debate because I want to talk about Ocarina of Time separately. But you go into Ocarina of Time and it's much more traditional. There were time elements. I think that's important. There was time travel. There's a pre Hyrule and a post Hyrule after Link is sealed away for 7 years and Hyrule's destroyed by Ganondorf and all that stuff. So there were mature themes to that game as well. But this one, with Majora's Mask, it's dark in a different way. So Link is traveling through the Lost Woods, and the opening cinematic's still great. He's traveling. I want to say a fairy hits him and like distracts him or something like that. But essentially, the Skull Kid is hanging out with a pair of fairies, kind of like Navi in the first game, and Link's knocked off his horse. Epona runs away. He's lost. The Lost Woods are already weird because even from the original Zelda, it's just an area where people get lost and like die in there essentially. And Majora's Mask is so weird that some people believe that Link died in the Lost Woods and that all of the happenings of Majora's Mask are just a crazy fevered death dream before he passes away. So you're already like, if people are coming up with these types of ideas, and here's what I don't want to say a conspiracy, but it's like, no, he's actually dead, and this is all a fever dream. That's how weird the game is, and for those that have played it, you kind of know. It's also it's a really great game, even with how, oh man, I hate using strong words, but how obnoxious some of the ideas and elements are. it somehow works together and creates an experience that's just like melancholy. It's like from the beginning to the end, it's bittersweet. Like there's moments of happiness, there's moments of sadness, and like things. It for me too. It also makes me like Link more so as a character, where there's not many main protagonists that are like him. Like, Link is a hero, so especially during this era, like he doesn't talk, he just does. So Skull Kid, you know, he's wearing Majora's Mask, which if you look at it from the very beginning, just the anesthetics of Majora's mask, the actual mask itself, it's creepy. It's a demonic mask that has like a demon inside of it that's pure evil. And you don't really notice it just yet, but it's corrupting Skull Kid to essentially destroy the world. Um, I forget how the curse happens, but early on, so a curse is put on Link, and it turns him into a Deku Scrub, and he's knocked down a hole, right? In the Lost Woods. I believe that I'm remembering all of this because I just replayed it. It's been a couple of months since I've actually finished, like a month or two. And so a lot of people, that's where they're like, oh, that's where he falls down the hole and dies. So you get down there. I believe you're still in human form, but long story short, you get to the end, you see these Deku Scrubs, and they're all dancing around you, and then all of a sudden, Link reawakens, and he's stuck as a Deku. And Deku Scrubs are kind of seen as like the second class citizens of the world. Like everybody's kind of mean to them. They're lighter, they're weaker, they kind of stick to themselves. They're tradesmen, so in this area, there's a lot of you run into a lot of Deku Scrubs, and they're kind of like businessmen. So they will have a flower that they reside in, and you can give them something to purchase their flower, and that helps you like navigate. But long story short, so you wake up, you're possessed as the Deku Scrub, and you go and you talk to the Happy Mask salesman. And you're outside of Clocktown in Termina, so that's kind of like the new world and everything like that. You're not in Hyrule for this journey. And the theme is everybody's talking about in 3 days' time, they're going to have this big firework event, and they're celebrating this festival, and everybody's like looking up at the moon. You look up at the moon. First of all, the moon is this gigantic face with a huge nose and like red and yellow eyes and big teeth, and it's just like, huh, that's weird. And the game takes place across, so we're going to talk about time travel here, but the game takes place across a 3-day period that I think is about an hour long. So each cycle, there's day 1, day and night, day 2, day 3, day and night cycles of each of them. And essentially your goal is to prevent the moon from crashing into Clocktown and obliterating everybody and killing everybody that you meet, including Link, and destroying the world. And for some reason, Majora's Mask is making Skull Kid do this. So it's possessing him essentially and making him act differently and bad. And Skull Kid doesn't have any friends, so he befriends 2 fairies who are, being nice to him. Then all of a sudden they see him kind of like warping into this mean and evil thing that's bringing upon the destruction of everyone around you. So that's already uncomfortable. And the game makes you feel even more uneasy with the day and night cycle. So from the very beginning, you can slow down time. So the time can kind of, go at the standard pace, which is pretty fast, but you can slow down time so you have more time to kind of accomplish your goals. And during this era too, there was a lot of time mechanics. So it's kind of funny playing certain games that maybe didn't hold up as much, and you see time limits added into things like, oh, go do this in 20 seconds, or hey, you have 5 minutes to do this, or whatever it is, and you don't really see that too much anymore. And the reason I mention that is I remember at the time, the 2 things I didn't like around this time frame were time limits, because I'm like, oh man, it just makes everything stressed out. It's like Pikmin, where you just have a very limited amount of time, and if you don't do everything in the right amount of time, you lose. So you feel like rushed. So, but it adds to the uneasy and kind of panicked feeling of the game. And it's really cool because, as the days progress, you go to day 2 and day 3, the music picks up and the moon is closer. And by day 3, the earth is literally shaking because the moon's getting so much closer. Everybody's looking up at it. But every single non playable character that you see in this game goes through those 3 days, regardless if you're there or you're not. So everything, you see the mailman like running around and you can follow him to his entire route. And then, at the very end of the last like 6 hours or whatever, he's having a panic attack, not delivering the mail anymore. And he's just kind of like freaking out. So you kind of get to see everybody's experience through this 3-day cycle. And your ultimate goal is to prevent the moon from crashing and killing everyone. The Happy Mask salesman that you meet is a friend. And here's where it gets really interesting too, is like all of these non-playable characters, these NPCs and everything, they're from Ocarina of Time. So you get to see kind of like a bizarro version of them. So it already makes you feel uneasy because you're like, okay, well, I remember the Happy Mask salesman. He just kind of, worked at the shop, didn't do too much. And now he's kind of guiding Link into his journey, kind of giving you your first thing that you need to accomplish. And he's like, you need to get me Majora's Mask back. It's a demonic mask, and it's going to usher in the death of everything. That Skull Kid took it from me. You need to get it back. And the way that he moves, too, is very uneasy because he skips frames. So he'll just be, like looking at you, and then all of a sudden he'll skip a frame and he's shaking Link like, you need to get this back. But long story short, I'm trying to think of yes, okay. So you have to play through the first cycle. So this is you get to experience, the first hour of the game as a Deku Scrub. Nobody likes you, the dogs attack you, everybody's mean to you. You have different powers in these mask forms too. So the game's centralized theme is masks as well. There's I want to say, I think 30. Man, I feel embarrassed. I should have counted, but I think there's 27 or 30-ish total masks that each have a function or something that they accomplish within the game. They all have like a thing that they do that assists Link, but there's transformation masks, and there's a handful of them. The 3 main are Deku Scrub, the Goron, and then Azora. And the Happy Mask salesman plays a song, so the ocarina is back, of course, because once again, they're using basically all of the same stuff, and there's some new elements sprinkled in as well. Like the Master Sword is not in this game, for example, which once again just makes this feel like such a bizarro adventure because, Ganon's not in it. It's really just like this little uneasy side adventure that Link from Ocarina of Time goes through that severely splits and continues to split the Zelda timeline, which the Zelda timeline is funny. I'm not going to get too much into that just because personally I don't. If you try to think about it too much, you're like, good God, Hyrule, everybody hates it. I would not want to live in Hyrule. There's a peaceful period. If you can get like right in between the peaceful period of the world or Hyrule being destroyed or taken over, or Ganondorf doing crazy evil things, like you want to be in like the, whenever they have like a 70-year period and just please die before that, before, Hyrule gets flooded or a moon crashes into the planet and kills everybody. But the transformation masks, and I want to try to explain like how creepy everything is. So Happy Mask Salesman, I thought he played the Song of Healing, but I think you have to go through a cycle one time as the Deku Scrub. And there's a few tasks to complete, but you actually get to the end, and the clock tower opens up, and that's where you can go confront the Skull Kid. So basically, you're going there with all of the objectives that you completed in the world. They'll carry over by measurements of like how many masks you have, how many of the boss masks, etc. But you get to him, and he's like, okay, this is the last 5 minutes, and he starts summoning the moon down. And the Deku Mask has powers, so, you can press A, and you'll, like, slide kind of quickly across the floor. You can shoot a little bubble, and that little bubble is kind of like shooting arrows, but it's kind of weak, so it just has, like, it can pop balloons and stuff like that. It's nothing, like, real crazy, but you hit him, as he's trying to summon the moon, and he drops the ocarina, and you go there and you play the Song of Time, and it's like, oh, you have this magical Song of Time. Playing this song with the ocarina teleports you back to dawn of the first day. So you're able to kind of push back the moon colliding with the planet and doing all this. And when you do that, I believe you talk to the Happy Mask Salesman again, and he plays the Song of Healing, which has healing qualities, and it takes that Deku Scrub mask, or excuse me, takes that Deku Scrub form and lifts the curse from Link and gives you a mask. Now that mask allows you to transform into a Deku Scrub at will. As you progress, you can do the same thing with the Goron mask, the same thing with the Zora mask. One of the bizarre things is, as you put on one of the transformational masks, you can see it is scary, and it's painful to Link. And it just adds to like how creepy everything is. And I want to talk about like when I played it 25 years ago too, to like explain how creepy the game is. But you put the mask on, and Link's voice becomes distorted, and he leans up and he's like half transformed, and he screams. He's like, ah, and then you're transformed. And that will play every time you put one of those masks on, like this painful gutturally scream that is very clear that like using the transformation masks is extremely uncomfortable or full-blown painful for Link. And that's like a main theme of the game. So like every time you go to, I always skip them now because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is creepy. And speaking of skipping stuff, at this time in my life when I first played Majora's Mask, the Nintendo 64 was in our, like, we called it the back room. And the back room, nobody ever used this area of the house. It's like kind of funny. I'm actually having trouble kind of remembering it. I haven't been in my childhood home in such a long time. I'm trying to think. So there was like a room, and we used it later on for like other things, but I remember it had a couch and it had a TV, and there were like plants in it and everything like that. And that's kind of where it led to the attic, which is where my room was as like a teenager. And the Majora's Mask ran on a souped up version of the Ocarina of Time engine. So it was one of like a couple games that used this little expansion pack that doubled the memory of the 64. Had a little red top. And I love Nintendo for doing this because they just designed a game and they're like, the 64 can't run it. So you got to put this in there. It gives it more memory. We can use that memory to run this game. So it's already like everything is weird about this experience so far. But I remember I would turn it on, and you're on those old tube TVs, so everything's like darker on the TV. And to this day, when I fire up Majora's Mask, I press start as quickly as I can, because if you just watch the opening, Majora's Mask starts coming from a distance and like spinning and flutters towards the screen. And as it gets towards the screen, it just makes like a deep like a deep whooshing sound. And that just creeped me out as a kid. Like, it just made me feel uneasy. I think I was 12 when I originally played it. 12 or 13 or something. And that's how uneasy the game made me feel. Is that even on the startup screen, I would frantically press the start button on the 64 controller just to not let Majora's Mask get too close to the screen. Like, it just like creeped me out. And I still, even on this playthrough, still did it. Now, it was a little bit easier to avoid because I was using save states on the 64 as my main, saving system, just to, because we'll talk about the save system as well. It's a little bit flawed. So it's a product of its time. And anytime you save in the main game, it literally saves everything that's done, and you have to save or it will delete chunks of your progress. And that was part of too, getting to the fourth temple. I remember doing something, but I didn't progress enough. And I was like, oh, I'll just turn it off because it'll go. Nope, it doesn't go back to your most recent save. It actually, at certain parts of the game, will delete more of what was saved. And it's like, hey, it warns you too, like, please save before he turned this game off. So everything about the game is just uncomfortable. You have a time limit. You have just creepiness. You have to use a memory expansion as part of it. If you don't save correctly, you lose chunks of your save. It almost feel. I know the whole point of the game is like, Majora's Mask is cursed, but the experience just feels cursed. Like it feels like you're trying to save this town that doesn't actually exist, and there's a lot preventing you from doing it. And I feel like that's why people look so fondly back upon this game. It's one of the few Zelda games where I probably don't recommend multiple playthroughs. Like, I'll give you an example, like Ocarina of Time. Like every year or two, I go back, 30 or 25 years plus later, and I'll replay it. And there's like several games on that list. There's like, 5 or 10 games that I will go back through, like Pokemon Red and Blue. I'll go back through and like play that every once in a while just to, play it again because it's fun. But Majora's Mask is one of those games where I feel like if you beat it and get all of the masks, that you've experienced it. It's not, the experience is so unique and it sticks with you, but in an uncomfortable way. The only way I can describe it is kind of like, have you ever looked back fondly about a bad time of your life? And you can look back on it with a retrospective of having gone through it. And, sometimes you know, have something that you need to overcome in your life, or you just have like a bad time of your life, and you kind of look back on it fondly because you got through it. There is a happy ending, but it's bittersweet because, you had to go through the darkness to get to the light, so to speak. I know that sounds kind of dramatic, but that's what the game and experience kind of leaves you with. And that's why, like, I think there's nothing wrong with playing through it multiple times. I think from beginning to end, I completed it 3 full times and then have a couple like half playthroughs out there. But it gives you that feeling, and I really do believe that's why Majora's Mask is looked back upon fondly, because you had this. It's a good game, but in this game's world, you go through kind of a traumatic experience. And there is a happy ending, but it's not completely happy. I think with a lot of things like life are like that. Not everything's happy, not everything's bad. Sometimes you go through an experience, or like you lose someone and it's bittersweet. Like you're happy at the happy times, but there are bad times as well. And you kind of sit on that experience as a whole. It's like yin and yang. Like you need the light, you need the dark, and that's how Majora's Mask is. It's even, I've never talked about another Zelda game like this before. Even Ocarina of Time. That was the first game that I played where, for me, that game signifies games as an art form. Games as something more than just a video game. Like that was the first time I played it, and I was like, this is a different experience. And that's kind of like my looking back. That's how I view Ocarina of Time. And Majora's Mask is like losing a loved one. And I know that sounds so dark and weird. This is going to be a weird one. I'm going to jump back into a lot more of the gameplay mechanics and kind of like what you do and everything, and some other comparisons. But it's like losing a time in your life or a loved one, and you can never quite go back. Like you can't rewrite it. You can't, like, the experience happened. You can't go back and change it, you know? And I know that's kind of heavy and dark. So we're going to kind of jump into a few other things here to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But the game structure too, I really like. So if you listen to this podcast a little bit, I like structure in video games. Games can be open world. I love open world games as well. But I love when a game has a structure. And the structure of Majora's Mask, since it had to have the save file and everything on there, there's less dungeons, and you have to, they had a chunk of the game probably just specifically locked off for the entire save mechanic, because anytime you save the game, like you're at day 2 Here's all of the things you accomplish. Here's all of the masks that you have. Here is where the world stands statically right now until you kind of fire it back up. So it's kind of interesting. Like as you cycle through the game and you accomplish more things, those accomplishments aren't taken away. So for example, there's 4 dungeons. So and the first 3 represent each of the races of the transformational masks. So you have your Deku temple, you have your Goron temple, you have your Zora temple, and then you have a 4th dungeon that's kind of like a culmination of everything. The Stone Tower. It's arguably one of the hardest dungeons in the game. Very interesting to kind of go back through it now. And view it retrospectively. It's really funny now having, geez Louise, over 30 years of video game experience and kind of like seeing things. So you kind of know the mechanics, you kind of understand it. And I see games through the minds of the developers, especially the first few generations now, like your classics. Like you can kind of have the game figured out and go into it. And it's like, well, this was designed in mind, not trying to rhyme, but it was designed in a way in which you're supposed to solve the puzzle. And it has made like a lot of the dungeons easier for me. Like I was able to get through all of the temples first time pretty easily this time, where part of the panic is, being in a temple and you're like, oh my gosh, I might not have enough time to do this. But one thing I kind of came back into this experience was I'm not going to try to rush a bunch of things. Like if I need to accomplish something, I'm just going to take that whole cycle to do that and then start fresh and then go into a temple. And I went into every new area and every new temple completely fresh with a 3-day cycle, which was kind of nice. But yeah, you have 4 temples, several transformational masks, and then you kind of have your side masks. Like, for example, your Deku mask is your main mask that you need to navigate the first temple. And it's really kind of fun seeing, like, I actually really like the Deku scrubs. I feel like that might be my favorite mask, which is kind of bizarre. The Goron mask is probably the coolest, but the Deku mask, we talked about what that does. The Goron mask, and they're based off of people too. So the Deku mask, this is so interesting. The Deku mask was kind of Link's curse lifted of him being turned into a Deku scrub. But the Goron mask was based off of a Goron hero that died. And you're able to kind of talk to him and he gives you your mask, and like, so they think you're that character. Like the other NPCs essentially think that you're that character, even though it's basically the ghost of that NPC, like giving you his mask. Like, hey, I died with regret and I could not accomplish what I was trying to accomplish. Here's my mask. Like, here's the embodiment of my journey that ended in failure. Can you please continue and like complete my objective? Because essentially, like, until they hand that mask off, like, they're a ghost because they couldn't move on to the afterlife because they died. Like, they failed at what they were trying to accomplish and who they were trying to protect. The Zora one, too, is, like, so freaky. Like, you go into the Great Bay Area, and the Zora that you take the mask of, you see him in the water drowning. Isn't that crazy? Like, a Zora who, like, they're water aquatic people, and he's just, like, so exhausted and he's just dying, and you push him to shore and he's like, thank you, but it's too late for me. I wasn't able to, accomplish and save those that I was trying to save. And he dies, and you have his gravesite, and you get the transformation. Like, he gives you his being essentially. The game's main theme is, curse or death. And I think that's why, too, that conspiracy or that theory, whatever you want to call it, is that, Link might have died and this is like his death fever dream, because every part of the story and the theme of the game is cursed and death. So we'll kind of start and kind of go through with my experiences here. The Deku Palace, I really liked all of the temples. They didn't have like your traditional themes. Like the themes were more of like the people. So like for the Dekus, for example, the Dekus are about to punish a monkey that you make friends with, who's like, holy smokes, I'm friends with the Deku princess. You got to help me. They're going to burn me alive here. You got to go rescue her. She's in the temple. And when you get to the temple being or spirit or whatever, they also had masks that I believe were like kind of, they were cursed, or the bosses are kind of interesting because I feel like Majora put them there, or he corrupted the original Temple Guardian or something like that. So the first one, you go through, you can collect all the fairies too, and all okay. Take a step back. You get a fairy mask pretty early on, and whenever you put the fairy mask on, the Great Fairy is broken up into like 16 fairy sprites, like little weird looking fairy things with legs. They always look so weird to me. They still look weird. You got to look it up. It's like they're the weirdest thing ever. But you collect them all, and they turn back into the Great Fairy, and they give you, I think the first one you do, you get your magic meter. You get, let's see, you get an extended magic meter with one of them, extra defense for another. There's one for each of them, but I always remember getting the magic meter extended was like, I'm like, I got to do this one. I forget. You get like maybe double damage on one. I could be misremembered, but long story short, you go through and you get to the final boss, and they're all so creepy. They all have that tribal theme. So like Majora is obviously like a cursed mask, and they talk a lot about that. But each of like everything feels kind of tribal. So like you kill the first boss, and you're given its mask, and it's like, hey, we remove the curse, and this is kind of like what's left over is like the mask. So it's like they took the curse out. The swamp's no longer poison, for example. That's a big theme. Like purifying water is always huge in Nintendo games. But you do that, you have that mask, so that's like your placeholder for like you saved the first temple. Now you can go back if you recycle or go through another cycle, you can go back and fight the boss again. And sometimes that's needed because the world changes after you beat that area. So for me, it was really important on this playthrough to do every area you go into, not even including Clocktown, which is just chopped full of like, the game is extremely dense for things to accomplish, but if you beat the boss, the world changes, the area changes. So what I did this time is I pretty much did everything that I could on a cycle before going into the boss and unlocking the temple. So, getting the song that unlocks the temple, getting any upgrades or anything like that, any heart pieces I can find, saving anybody, getting any masks that I could. Like when I was talking about the side masks earlier, like for example, one of them, is a mask that you get that sniffs out truffles because you need a truffle to, progress a certain, quest line and everything like that. So it gives you a pig mask, and that pig mask is specifically just to smell for truffles because you need a truffle for something. So a lot of the masks are like that. But after each temple, there is a giant, and they're teaching you an Oath of Order song. And there's like, hey, there's 4 of us. We know the Skull Kid. We don't know what's happening, but if you can free and break the curse, all 4 of us can come together and help. Like that's kind of what you're getting at. You're like, okay, so that kind of gives you your goal, right? The Goron Temple, this is great too, because Gorons obviously love like lava and, hot environments. And you go to the Goron area and you just got Snowhead Temple. Everything's like, everybody's freezing. The main Goron that you get the mask from died. I think he froze to death or something. He's like, oh my God, I got cold and I died. So after lifting the curse from that temple, all the snow melts, right? And you kind of get your spring area. They didn't include the Master Sword, but what I did on one of these playthroughs too is after you beat the Snowhead Temple, which was, all these temples are pretty unique. The first one I would say is kind of like forgettable, doesn't really stand out, but every temple after that I really liked the themes of, even if they were more difficult as it went along. But Snowhead Temple, everything is icy, and the Goron, which is actually really cool for the 64 era too, but the Goron's powers are, you can punch. So they can pretty much all attack in some facet, but he can punch, so he can, there's a giant pillar, and you can raise and lower the pillar using Goron ground pounds, punching ice blocks out of the way, that unlock the temple. The temple is high up, so it's like you walk in and you can very clearly like, I need to get to the top. And you don't want to fall too. Falling was scary because like the Goron rolls, excuse me, and as he rolls faster and faster, like the longer he rolls, spikes come out, and he's like, flying along. So you kind of use that to navigate like certain areas too, because it's like grippy. So like you'll launch yourself up, which was really interesting. But you get to the top of Snowhead Temple, and another interesting boss. So goat, that one always sticks out to me. So like he's a goat who drops bombs and is like running in a big circle, and you roll, and as your spikes come out, you kind of like hit his foot, and then he'll fall, and then you can go like punch him or hit him with your sword or whatever to damage him. And eventually like you get his mask too. But it was really cool because like after the snow melts, you kind of go back out and you're like, oh, okay, so there's a lot more other things that I can do here. And one of them is the Goron race. So you can race as the Goron. They give you a bottle of like gold dust, and you use that gold dust to go and you can upgrade your sword. So you run into this really weird guy and this also like large guy who doesn't talk and has a mask on. It's such a weird scenario. Like honestly, I don't know how to describe it. It's a very weird environment for the guy that like upgrades your swords, but it takes like an entire day to upgrade it. And I think you like upgrade it twice. So you have to upgrade it, and then he's like, oh, I can upgrade it again because that'll give you 100 slashes. But if you upgrade it again, I can give you a permanent one. And you get this like gilded sword by the third day that has like double damage. It looks awesome. You have better range. You don't get the master sword, but you do get that sword, which was really cool. So it was nice taking the stress off because I was like, I want that sword. So I literally just took an entire day cycle and just rushed through, just did everything that I needed to do, beat the boss again, got the gilded sword, and then reset the time. And I remember when I was playing it, 25 years ago as a teenager, trying to accomplish too many things. So that was one of the, just through an additional, however, 25 years of additional gaming experience, I was like, oh, I'll make this less stressful. I'll just upgrade my sword on this cycle, right? And then go back through, and then you get to keep it. So you lose things like bombs, arrows, rupees, and everything like that. There is a bank to store the rupees, so there's kind of like a saving grace there. But anything that you go through, any mask that you get, you keep. So resetting time isn't necessarily a bad thing. And keep in mind that as you do these, Link can only be in one place at one time, and there's like 60 different, things you could be doing during that cycle. I really liked the ice area. It's uncomfortable, but that's like the beauty of this game is like you're enjoying your experience, but it's uncomfortable. And that's really how that like temple felt. Like I remember like falling and then having to climb all the way back up and like figuring it out and like launching yourself and then getting the boss key and going into the boss room was just like such a great feeling. Like getting through there, killing the boss, getting the mask, resetting the time, and you're just like you feel really accomplished. But it's one of those where I'm like, Majora's Mask has temples where I'm like they're great to experience one time, where I can go back with Ocarina of Time and play it millions of times, but I don't think it devalues the overall experience of the game. It has a water temple as well, and this is where it starts getting a little tricky. And during the remake, I think this is important to notate too. The remake of Majora's Mask is so different. Basically, what happened is when Nintendo did the 3D remake of Ocarina of Time, they weren't necessarily going to do Majora's Mask. They were like kind of waiting on the popularity, but it got a lot of really positive fan feedback. So what they did as a development team were like make a list of all the things that were kind of a pain in the butt with Majora's Mask, and there's completely separate guides. I feel like I prefer the original greatly, but they remade so many things that are just in different areas to try to like streamline it, that it also kind of like just adds to how unique the original experience was. That I do not feel that if you're going to play Majora's Mask for the first time, I feel like your experience needs to be with the 64, because the 3DS version is still good and changes so much of it. But they change like everything. Like things are just, there's an extra bottle. Like, so, you have so many bottles, and in the Zora area, there's, I want to say like 7 Zora eggs that you have to get. You have to bring them back to the starting area. But to do so, you have to break into the pirate fortress. And if the pirates see you, so it's the Gerudo pirates, the all-female pirates from, from Ocarina of Time. So the desert pirates, essentially. And this time, Those characters have stolen the Zora eggs. I forget why they're even doing it, because they wanted to get to the temple. Their plan goes completely awry. It was actually kind of funny, but you break in and you're playing Metal Gear Solid at this point. Like, you're sneaking around, and your goal is to get these like 7 Zora eggs and bring them back to the one scientist who's also from Ocarina of Time, and you put them in this, this aquarium, this water, and the female Zora who laid the eggs, she's not talking. She's just like got, 1,000-yard stare going on because she's traumatized that, her eggs were stolen and everything. But you bring them back, they turn into little Zora, baby Zora looking things, and they give you a song that allows you to summon the turtle to get to the temple. So you can kind of see that the way that this game works is you're constantly finding things that you need to check the box on to progress a certain thing. So there's like 8 things that need to happen just so you can get into the temple. And that's why, my recommendation if you're playing this is to just take a full cycle and do the side stuff as much as you can in the area and just accomplish that, and then use a full cycle when you actually get the song to get into the temple. Because what's nice is after you've completed all that the first time, you have the song that overrides needing to do any of that again. But a great example of, I'm trying to explain how the game is. Like, the game prevents you from doing certain things, and it kind of doesn't make sense. And the best way to kind of just experience it is honestly to kind of go into it blind, and it's going to lead into a lot of wasted cycles and confusion. But you can actually go through that pirate fortress playing Metal Gear Solid, basically, where you're like sneaking around, because if they see you, they throw you out. You got to start fresh. You got to sneak back in and do the whole dang thing again. And the actual fortress too, it's very similar to the Ocarina of Time one. It's kind of like a puzzle, and you got to use the hook shot to kind of navigate around and collect these eggs. But you can only carry 1 Zora egg per bottle, so you can already kind of see that they added a bottle in the 3DS remake just because it was kind of a pain in the butt. Because I think I had 3 or 4 bottles at the time, so I had to break back into the fortress several times just to have the bottles free. But here's a great example. If you go towards the final pre-area that gets you towards like the stone temple, right? So you got to sneak into this area. If you get the lens of truth and you just so happen to be in that area, like, your fairy will go towards an invisible area. There's nothing there, but it's like, hey, it's like you should be looking at this. Like, do you sense something? You do the lens of truth, and there's a soldier there who he's like, I'm so plain, nobody can see me, but I think he was on the precipice of dying. So you give him, like a red potion, and because of that, he gives you a mask, the stone mask, which just has like a plain looking funny face. And if you're wearing that as Kid Link in the Gerudo area, they won't chase after you. They won't throw you out. They just don't see you. You're basically invisible. And what's really funny is they put that NPC at that area in the 3DS version because they were like, because it's so out of the way. Like, you have to go to this, basically what leads you to the starting area of the final temple area. Like, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know what would bring you there. Like, I'm really trying to think of like, just outside of like exploring and kind of like putzing around. But keep in mind, running around to certain areas too is like a little uncomfortable, because there's bomb chews just running at you and exploding, and you need Epona, so you have to do the Epona. You have to go unlock her, which is just like, you're constantly kind of running into roadblocks, and it's a puzzle. It's like a Rubik's Cube almost. Like, you have to do like these 3 steps first before it leads you into, where you need to accomplish it. But I couldn't even imagine if you didn't have the stone mask sneaking through there. And I'm pretty sure on my first playthrough, I did not have the stone mask, like sneaking through this area. It's so funny, but it's like they put everything in semi-random areas. But once again, I don't like the 3DS version because they're like, well, that kind of didn't make sense. But it's like, yeah, but it's part of the experience. Like, you're, traveling around and just like exploring the uncomfortable areas where everything's trying to kill you and everything's dying, and there's so much death. Like, there's a mask. For example, when you're in Clock Town, you see 2 twin sisters, and they're doing a dance, but they can't quite figure it out. And if you're riding around at night, there's like these giant rock mushroom structures or whatever they are, and you'll just be like driving along, and you'll see like some guy on the rock dancing, and he's like, "Hey, I'm dying. Let me teach you this awesome dance move, and then I'll give you my mask." And then he just, I'm pretty sure, dies too. And you go wear that mask. You teach them that cool dance move. That's all the mask does is you hold B, and he starts doing like this dance with this music. And that's like the super special dance that like you pass down onto them that completes their quest line. You get a bomber's handbook too, which is also so interesting. Like the game, I think, knew that as you're completing these tasks, you could lose track of things. So you get a bomber's book, which are these like little kids. You needed to kind of like play hide and seek with them, but it gives you a stamp of every NPC and like where their quest line is along with it. I personally, a million years ago, used an issue of Nintendo Power, and I might just do a Nintendo Power episode, but I miss Nintendo Power. I wish I could still get those magazines in the mail, but I had one issue that I think I went to Walmart, and like you could buy individual episodes of Nintendo Power at like the magazine rack, and I just so happened to be there when they had the volume that had Majora's Mask, the mask guide, and it was like 3 pages, 3 or 4 pages, but it was dedicated to just getting every single mask. It was like a little mini guide. How cool is that? Like that's how I got every mask in the game on my main playthrough back in the day. And you get a pretty hefty reward for getting them all as well. But the Zora area kind of stuck with me because every area too has a gold Scatola house where, of course there's a curse. This game's all about curses and death. And if you go and find all 30 of them, only on the first day, you get a bigger wallet. I believe it's bigger wallet. But I did it on day 2, and he's just like, "Oh, I wish you would have come here earlier." And you don't get the bigger wallet. Like I literally, after getting all 30 of those and solving those dang odd puzzles of finding all 30 of those things and listening to them like scratching around, that's how like a room has some of the gold Scatolas. Is like, it's just weird, creepy. Everybody's cursed, and then it's like, "Oh, you came on the wrong day." So part of me, like, if you would sit down, just like Nintendo's development team did for the remake, and sit down and say, "Here, write a list of everything that's kind of annoying." That's what they were like solving for. It's just like, "Oh yeah, you can't do it." And it's funny, like if you look anything up now, there's literally like 2 guides, and it's like, if you're playing the 64 version, here's what happens. If you're playing the 3DS version, here's what happens, and they're different. So it's like the Ocarina of Time remake was kind of more of what I was looking for. Like I didn't want the game changed. Just kind of like Final Fantasy VII. If they did remake it, I wish they would have just made it pretty and not messed with anything else or changed the story drastically or released it across 12 years over 3 games. But it's just like little things like that that kind of stand out that like, you're like, "Oh, I forgot to do this." Now it's a pain in the butt. But the water temple this time too, so that's the third temple. And there's water flow, so you can change the water levels and the flow of the water. And there's like a main room with a spinning like windmill thing that stirs the water either clockwise or counterclockwise. And looking back on that now, I really liked it because I went into this kind of like, okay, that's the mechanic of the temple, and not real like this time the water's going clockwise or whatever. I went into every area and completed every area that I could while going clockwise. And then after I feel like I kind of did everything that I needed to do, then I turned it, and then I went into every room after that. So it didn't feel as stressful this time. Like I felt like I had a good mechanic of like, okay, water, scary, bad, ugh, ugh. But it wasn't as bad this time. I feel like Nintendo's water levels are painful, but like you kind of finish it and you're like, that was fun. Like I'm glad I figured that out. Just to lead to the creepiness too, I shouldn't say hated, but playing on an old tube TV and fighting the final boss. So the final boss is like possessed giant angry fish guy, and there's a platform in the center, and then you can jump in the water. But the water was so dark on the old tube TV that like I was afraid to be in the water. Like that's how like uncomfortable it was. So basically, from the platform, you can the Zora too. I guess I should tell you what he does. So He can take both of his fins and shoot them off of his hands like two boomerangs, which was really cool. And he can also like punch and attack, and obviously like swim really fast, and also sink and like run across like water. That's basically what the Iron Boots kind of replaced, was this like Zora functionality. It's really cool too, just being like anywhere in the game, and you can change into any of those masks and use their powers like anywhere. So like it's it's like it's a Zelda game, so like you get a mechanic that allows you to progress in different areas. So I did really like that. But the boss was just so uncomfortable. I was afraid of the boss when I played it the first time. So like, I can't see. I'm uncomfortable. This time wasn't too bad. Mainly stayed on the platform, shot my fins down, stunned him, jumped in, like hit him a bunch of times. Eventually, you can shock him too. I forgot about that. I always forget about that. The Zora has this electrical like shield that shocks everything around you. And you need that because he releases like a bunch of these like bony little fish that bite you, and it's just really annoying. I think you can swim into him and shock him too, and that stuns him. But yeah, you kill him, you get his mask. So at this point, you've completed 3 of the 4 temples. The 4th temple, the pre area. So you go into an area that is just all death and dying, and just you're continuing down this path of like everything's uncomfortable. There's this music box playing that's keeping these undead away, and you go into this one cave in the back. And as soon as you walk in, a Poe or this ghost is like, "This is who I am, and I'm cursed, and I'm gonna kill you." And it just immediately he starts draining your life and killing you, so you have to run out. But if you go to the graveyard, his brother, who he betrays and kills, you get the Song of Storms, and if you play that song for him, it like lifts the curse of him, and he's able to kind of like go into the afterlife as well. And keep in mind, not really a happy ending. Like, you absolve him of his sins, so to speak, and you lift the curse off of him. But he was cursed because he basically like killed his brother. So you utilize that storm. It rains, creates water through this death canyon basically, and plays the music. All of the dead guys walk away. But what's interesting is you need to sneak in, and there's a daughter who will come out of that little water wheel house. And if you sneak in, you go downstairs, right? And you go, and then all of a sudden this guy pops out, and he's just like half dead, half mummy, just like and just like starts walking towards you, and you're like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" He just like pops out of a closet. Well, this poor little girl, her dad got cursed, and she's hiding him in there and trying to like figure out how to like lift this curse. It's just so crazy. You play the Song of Healing though, like if you think back and he starts walking towards you, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I know, like Link was healed through this. Like, what if I play the Song of Healing here?" And he eventually gives you a mask which prevents any of like the zombie guys from attacking and killing you. But you get to reunite daughter and father. It's like it's all about curses and death with this game, and it's really interesting because it almost reminds me of Silent Hill. Did not ever expect to say that, but it's like everybody has a different version of Silent Hill, which is essentially like a cursed area that you go into, and like it's almost like a punishment until you kind of like atone, where it's like, if you experienced your trauma or whatever impacted you, you see monsters in areas that represent your trauma. And somebody else might be in Silent Hill, with you. You might run into them, but what they're seeing is completely different. They might not see monsters. They might see like a room of fire, or torture or something like that. That's kind of what it reminds me of. It's like every NPC in this game is grappling with their own version of this 3-day cycle, which is full of pain. And, you get to lift the curse off of him, which kind of like progresses that area before you get to the Stone Temple, which is the final temple. And it was kind of interesting. Like, you do all of this. It's fascinating because even though there are only 4 temples, which I know up until this point, I think it was like 8 temples was like, Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time. There's less, but the pre-areas and like the levels that lead you to the temple are really, there's a lot in them. But eventually you go and like you fight these skull guys and this guard after solving like another temple area. And that allows you to basically fully progress. I believe, do you get a song? You get something. I think you get a song from them that allows you that any mask you're wearing or no mask, it leaves like a copy, a really creepy looking copy, like a little statue. So to get to the stone temple, you utilize that song, and every time you play it, you can leave one Kid Link, one Deku, one Zora, one Goron, and like you step on these like switches and you play that song and it keeps that there and it moves these blocks. So you basically like climb up and you have to like solve the puzzle utilizing that song and creating those like lifeless statues that you leave behind. Once again, just kind of creepy. The Link one doesn't look like Link. It just looks creepy. Like it looks like they don't have a soul. It's almost like it's like a doppelganger. There's a term for it where it's like a puppet that doesn't have a soul that was like created, and it's just creepy. But long story short, that's kind of how you get into the stone temple. The stone temple this time too was really interesting because if you exit the temple and you get the light arrows, you shoot a light arrow into this red switch that you unlock, and it inverts the temple. It literally turns it upside down. That mechanic was really interesting because the stone temple is kind of like, now that the game has given you all of the gameplay ideas, the masks, like you have essentially all of the items, and it's like a culmination of all of that, utilizing, all of those like little statues that you leave to solve it. Flipping it was really interesting. This was another time where I think I only had to flip it one additional time, but I went through the temple and I like literally solved for everything that I could. Exit, shoot the arrow, the arrow, flip the temple, which is so weird. But you go in like the temple's upside down, and then you beat the temple. It's like two temples in one. A very interesting mechanic for the time. And I know, as the 3D space kind of got better, Nintendo, really leveraged, especially like Wind Waker as well. Like every temple after that, you're utilizing the entire space to solve some of the temples, which is really clever. But this was like the first time where you go through, solve it all, flip it, and there's an entirely like new temple and like new things that you can kind of unlock and complete. You get the giant mask, so another transformational mask, but only leverage for this time. This is where too I understand, but I kind of didn't like them changing this because the boss, so it's two twin rovos or whatever, so it's like two of those like snake worm dragon guys that go into the sand and like pop out. But in the original, Link turns huge and then he can damage them because they're gigantic. So I think you have to have the stone mask, or excuse me, the giant mask. I think you have to have it. So, but I don't know. I feel like if you go in there, like they're just too giant. Like you can't even, like, you can bomb them, but I don't think you can hurt them. But Link turns huge. He's like 50 feet high, so he's like, "Huh, huh," like, slashing them and everything. Like that's pretty simple. So it's like that transformational mask didn't really have a mechanic, but it's really unique, and you can kind of see like what they were going for. I think in the 3DS version they changed it, where there's actually like you fight them as small Link, and then you turn large and like fight the other one. I get it. They were on a crunch here, so I don't know if they were just like, okay, you turn huge to fight these guys, but it was kind of like you just played Link normal. He was just giant, so you like put the mask on, then just started like smacking him with your sword. So maybe that like felt rushed at the time. Keep in mind, I think they developed the game in 15 months on a goal of 12 months. Please, video game industry, can we go back to a development cycle of 1 year? Is there like, I understand if you're going to make a Mario Zelda, like a big game, take your time on it. Okay, I can live with that. But if you're making a new game, does it make sense to take 7 years and a staff of like 5,000 people? It's just ridiculous. It's too, like, try to make the game in a small amount of time with the people you need. You know what I mean? I wish we could go back. Could you imagine having like a Zelda or a Final Fantasy like full game, every year? It probably too much. I know Assassin's Creed has been doing that, and the quality has gone up and down. Um, but basically, at this point, you've completed the four main temples. Now, one of the things you can do here is kind of go back. So one of the main quest lines, and I didn't complete it this time, but one of the main quest lines through it is one of the characters, I think the mayor's son or whatever, he was cursed and got turned into a kid, and he's like getting married in 3 days, so it's hilarious. So he's like hiding, they can't find him, but he's in Clocktown. And there's like 3 to 5 masks you get just from that portion. and you essentially help him lift the curse. And if you get all of the masks, you get a final transformational mask, which allows you to turn into this super ultra badass fighter. But that mask, that is the Fierce Deity mask. And it's kind of like the game's thank you. So there's 24 masks. I just looked it up out of curiosity. But it's, if you get all the masks, you get the Fierce Deity mask at the very end of the game. We'll talk about the end of the game here in a second. But basically, Link can transform. I believe it uses magic power, but you're like this tall, awesome looking godlike thing where you just like, he has cool like face paint. It's one of the weird. It's so odd because it doesn't really have much explanation, and I don't think it was ever really utilized ever again. But you transform almost into like an adult Link demigod who shoots beams from his sword, and he's just absolutely awesome. And it's kind of like a easy mode for beating the final boss. But to get to the final boss, so here, okay, you have all 4 masks of the bosses, right? You go back to confront the Skull Kid on the final day. The moon's about to crash down. And this time, you play the Oath of Order. And all 4 giants who you essentially, have helped by defeating, all 4 bosses, they come out, and they're like circular Pac-Man looking guys, except they have gigantic arms and legs. They're like 40 feet tall. It's so weird. But as the moon's coming down, they come and catch it and prevent it from falling and killing everything. This allows you to actually enter the moon. And everything about the game from this point on is kind of frustrating from a gameplay standpoint, but very interesting because you're in the moon and there's a bunch of children running around. And as you're like running around, the game is running, it's like blurry, and it's there's a frame rate drop, so it looks very thematic, like it looks very like movie like you're in a dream. And it's weird because there's all this happy grass. It actually looks like a beautiful day. There's grass everywhere, the sun's shining, it's like awesome. And there's these kids running around, and they're wearing the boss masks. And as you talk to them, they say, "Hey, I want to play with you. Give me some masks." So you give them your masks. And like they each take however many, right? And then you go into like a Deku Scrub themed area, which kind of challenges you. So it's like kind of like a little hard puzzle mode, utilizing the mask's power. But it's very challenging. And then you do one for the Goron. The Goron one was very frustrating because you're literally going through a maze as you're rolling as fast as you can. It's like bouncing you around. So that was actually tricky. I fell like way too many times on that because like if you didn't land it perfectly or you were holding a direction, the Goron would just like fall off the edge and you have to redo it. So that was kind of frustrating. The Zora one, you're swimming through these tubes and you have to like move kind of quickly and like get through the cycle, and then you'll get to the kid. But the whole goal is to give them all of your masks. Now, if you literally have every mask in the game and give them all of your masks, the kid wearing Majora's mask, who wants to play with you as well, so creepy. He's like, "I want to play." Okay. I believe he gives you the Fierce Deity mask. Now, this playthrough, I did not do the Fierce Deity mask because I've never actually fought Majora without it. So I wanted to go through and just kind of fight him normal to see how he is. It's easy mode, by the way. If you have Fierce Deity mask, like every form and version of Majora is so much easier. You just literally swing the sword and you blast them with these sword rays. But you go in there and he's like, "I want to play." And you finally confront Majora and all of the boss masks. And you're using, I ran out of arrows on this, by the way, even with the upgraded arrows, the quiver. But you shoot the masks, kind of keep them away, and then you shoot and damage his mask. But Majora goes through several forms, and the final form was actually really hard because as you get closer to him, he has these like long spaghetti arms. He like throws them at you and shocks you and like whips you. He actually does a ton of damage. And he's really hard to hit. And if you don't have any arrows to like stun him to run up and hit him, like I ran out of arrows because I was shooting all the masks, it's actually pretty difficult. I didn't die, but I definitely like took the most amount of damage, during that time of the game. So you kill Majora, you lock away the demon back inside the mask, like you kind of prevent it. You prevent the world from being destroyed, right? And upon doing this, you're able to give the Majora's mask back to the Happy Mask salesman, who is essentially just like, I'm gonna go on my journey now. Thank you for doing that. This mask needed sealed away. The spirit, like it basically needed sealed. Like this is a corrupt mask, and he like takes it, and for some reason he's able to carry this mask around and prevent it from being unleashed for some reason. But you get a really interesting ending where it's happy and sad. Now, regardless of how you beat the game, depending on the masks you have, there's like 4 different quick little cutscenes that you'll see that represent like you completing and helping everybody through their journey through that 3-day period. You prevent the moon from crashing, but you don't necessarily get your happy ending. One of the parts that you get to see is the Deku Scrub Butler. You pass a Deku Scrub who's like all twisted, and he has a distorted look on his face, and he's like a tree. You see him in the very beginning, right? And they even say like this tree looks horrified. And his son died that way and was like cursed and died. I don't know if it was from playing in the Lost Woods or something like that. He got lost and died out there. But you see the butler, Deku Scrub, out there, and he's just looking at his son. And that's the end of his storyline. And that goes back to the theme of just like curses and death and existing and living in situations where it's not always like a happy ending. Even the ending to this game is kind of odd, especially with how it leads to the timeline of the rest of the Zeldas. When Link leaves Hyrule to go on his journey of self-discovery or to do whatever, and he goes to Termina, I'm pretty sure he just like disappears after that, because Wind Waker is about like, they prayed for Link to come back to Hyrule because Ganon came back, and he just doesn't. Like, he just leaves, and that's the end. And that's why like I think that death theory kind of it came about as well. But you get to see this ending, and then it goes to the Skull Kid, who carved a picture in where he the Skull Kid kind of meets the 2 fairies, and it's him and Link and the fairies like just kind of carved in, almost like stick figures, almost just kind of like holding hands and like being friends. And that's really like that's the kind of the Skull Kid's journey, is he's so desperate to belong and to have friends that he let Majora's Mask kind of like corrupt him, or it did corrupt him because it realized like he was weak, or hurting, I guess. Like it kind of like took advantage of the situation that he was in and the sorrow that he was feeling. But that's the end, right? It kind of like shows you like what happens to a lot of the main characters, and like how you did bring a bittersweet ending to their journeys. And I think that's why like so many like Majora's Mask is just brilliant, because that's how it ends. Like you just see, Link leaves, and the Skull Kid is like, I have a friend in him, and he carves that as part of their journey together. But it's interesting because nobody remembers the moon crashing. You reset the cycle so many times that if you've completed everything in the game, they separately, Link's able to be in 60 different areas at once, but you kind of bring their journey to its conclusion, whether happy, whether sad, whether bittersweet, whether good, whether bad. And I feel like it's a really good reflection on life. And I feel that a lot of other Zelda games kind of follow the trope of hero saves the day. You save the day. Happy, right? And it's not all of them. It's not all video games, but generally speaking, so many games kind of follow that template. Where Majora's Mask is, you've completed your journey, and you have scars from your journey. And those scars never go away, and they're a reminder. And for your growth and going through those experiences, You've helped people along the way, and you've completed your journey. But it's not always a completely happy ending. You finish this experience with the memories, with the scars, and it's bittersweet. I'll end with this, and I appreciate you guys joining me on this discussion. Majora's Mask is a cult hit, or a cult favorite, I should say. It's pretty much any way it's measured. It's a classic game, well reviewed. People look back on it fondly. It's bizarre, it's weird, and it's a game full of pain. And as you get older, it is a reflection of how life truly can be. You know, there's the happiness, there's the sadness. It's a mixture of both. And that's, I think, the message that the developers portrayed all of these years later. If you can, play Majora's Mask 25 years later. It's still awesome. You know, even with some frustrating gameplay mechanics, it was really fun coming back to this game and reflecting on it. Thank you guys for joining me on this Majora's Mask retrospective, and I look forward to talking to you on the next one.